Good morning, class of 2023. Welcome to today's lecture. The topic for today is pulp and periapical pathology. In part 2 of this topic, we are going to discuss about the periapical pathology. In the previous week's lecture, we had discussed about the causes of pulpitis and the histopathological changes seen in various stages of pulp inflammation. We had also discussed about the sequelae of dental caries and their flowchart associated with it. The learning outcomes for today's topic will include to be able to compare the clinicopathological and radiographic features of periapical abscess, periapical granuloma and periapical cyst. We will also be able to differentiate the radiographic and histopathological changes seen in periapical pathology. So, what are periapical pathologies? These are lesions which appear around the root apex of a tooth. If we remember the sequelae of pulpitis, the dental caries begins at the base of the pit or fissures or can occur on the smooth surface. This caries progresses centrally, so that means the caries progresses from the enamel to the dentin and then the pulp. The pulp tissue is a soft connective tissue made up of loose fibrils, and it also contains vascularity and nerve fibers. When the infectious material from the dental caries encroaches the pulp, it results in inflammatory changes in what we call as pulpitis. We have discussed about the various stages or forms of pulpitis in the previous lecture. In today's lecture, we will discuss what happens when this inflammation crosses the apical foramen and reaches the periapical area. When that happens, a number of pathologies can occur depending on the grade of inflammation and on the virulence of the microorganisms involved. Broadly, these pathologies have been categorized as apical periodontitis, periapical abscess, periapical granuloma, and periapical cyst. In addition, we have some other pathologies which are related to low-grade irritation to the apical tissues. These are referred to as condensing osteitis, hypercementosis, and root resorption. So let's begin discussing the individual topics in the subsequent slides. The American Association of Endodontists have given the various terminologies for the routinely encountered periapical pathologies. If there is no inflammation in the periapical area, it is designated as normal apical tissue. Inflammation in the periapical area can be further classified as symptomatic apical periodontitis and asymptomatic apical periodontitis. If the inflammation is due to active infection, it can result in formation of pus which accumulates in the periapical area. In such a situation, it is referred to as acute apical abscess. The features of each of these pathologies have been categorized in these columns and can be referred for further understanding. So, apical periodontitis is nothing but inflammation at the periapical area. Fine. This inflammation is secondary to an infection, can be secondary to a trauma, and various other factors. But the most common cause for inflammation occurring in the periapical area is the extension of the infection through the dental caries. So the caries which extends into the pulp, resulting in pulpitis, which will further extend into the periapical area, is the most common cause of apical periodontitis. This apical periodontitis can be acute or chronic depending on the duration of the inflammation. Also, it is categorized into symptomatic and asymptomatic based on whether there is associated pain or not. Generally, a case of periodontitis, apical periodontitis, is associated with pain, and the associated tooth will show a deeply carious lesion, or the tooth may have undergone trauma. A classical finding of apical periodontitis is that the pain aggravates on mastication. The process of mastication transmits forces onto the occlusal surface of tooth, which is further transmitted into the periapical area, that is the periodontal ligament space. The presence of an inflammation in the periodontal ligament space will result in disturbance of the presence of edema, which upon mastication will result in disturbance of this fluid, which will compress the nerve fibers to result in pain. A classical clinical test which can be employed to determine periapical changes is the test of percussion. In the test of percussion, vertical percussion is done on the occlusal surface, generally on the tip of the cusp, such that the pressure is transmitted into the periapical area. Presence of any inflammation will result in pain and can be a sign of positive periapical involvement. Additionally, you can see in a radiograph a widening of periodontal ligament space. Normal tooth will have a uniform periodontal ligament space all around the tooth. However, inflammation in the periapical area will result in slight widening of the periodontal ligament space. This can be identified by following the contour of the lamina dura, which will show some bulbous enlargement at the tip. Histologically, generally there is no biopsy required for a simple case of apical periodontitis, but if at all a tissue is studied from the periapical area, it will show inflammatory cells in the periodontal ligament space. These cells can be acute or chronic inflammatory cells based on the stage of the disease. Also, edema can also be seen in the connective tissue. Treatment for apical periodontitis definitely includes root canal treatment because the infection has involved the pulp and the periapical area. Moving on to another periapical pathology, that is the periapical abscess. In case of periapical abscess, there is an acute infection in the around the root apex. This is generally a consequence of extension of an active pulpal infection into the periapical area. Depending on the duration and virulence of the infection, periapical abscess can be classified as either acute or chronic. This abscess will result in resorption of the periapical bone. The associated tooth is generally painful. Tooth will be positive to percussion tests. Also, at times, palpation of the vestibular area can result in tenderness. When the abscess is enlarged, it can extend beyond the alveolus and can be reflected onto the mucosa as a boil. Occasionally, we can see a sinus tract protruding out of the mucosa, which leads to discharge of the abscess, the pus from the abscess. A peculiar type or a special type of abscess that is referred to as phoenix abscess is an acute exacerbation of a chronic periapical lesion. So, an abscess is called a phoenix abscess when it was a chronic periapical abscess to begin with, but due to the increase in virulence of the microorganisms, it transforms into an active inflammatory process, resulting in an active exacerbation, acute exacerbation, and then it is called a phoenix abscess. So this is an important topic to know and requires further understanding from your side. Radiographically, periapical abscess can be detected by a number of certain changes which can be appreciated in the periapical area. The basic changes which can be seen is widening of the periodontal ligament space, which can also be seen in the case of apical periodontitis. As you can see in this image, there is a large radiolucency which can be seen around the apex of the tooth. If you follow the normal contours, you can see the thickness of the periapical area of the periodontal ligament space being maintained. However, here there is a widening. You can also see that there is loss of lamina dura. The lamina dura is a radio-opaque line which is formed along the socket of the tooth. However, in case of this, there is no lamina dura seen beyond certain level. That is because of the acute inflammation which has spread to the area. The periapical changes will be diffuse in nature, such that the borders are faint or not clearly definable. Untreated periapical abscess may extend to surrounding areas like the and result as dentoalveolar abscess. It can spread to the subcutaneous spaces or spread further and is referred to as Ludwig's angina. The infection can also spread to distant areas, in which case it is referred to as cellulitis. Treatment of periapical abscess requires drainage of the pus, drainage of the abscess, and also root canal treatment to treat the infected tooth. So if just the pus is drained and the tooth is left untreated, there is a potential for future recurrence of the infection. So a complete treatment for this condition will include the removal of the infective material through root canal treatment and also the removal of the pus by active drainage, and will also include antibiotic coverage for treatment of the infection. So sequelae of apical periapical abscess can include its spread into the vestibular region from the periapical area. If it is restricted only within the alveolus, it is referred to as a periapical abscess. It can spread buccally into the vestibular area and can be called as a vestibular abscess. It can spread palatally and present as a dome-shaped swelling of the palate and result in a palatal abscess. It can also move into various spaces, tissue spaces around the tooth. Various spaces are there around the parotid, around the body of the mandible, in between the masseter, buccinator, the muscles, and it has potential to spread out of the bone into these various spaces and result in what we call as space infections. Please remember this terminology, space infection. These are important topics to know and has also been discussed as part of your problem based learning part 2. So it has the potential to migrate, the abscess may migrate to various tissue spaces and result in space infection. This is another representation of the various spaces around the tooth in relation to the mandible and maxilla where the infection can spread. So involvement of multiple spaces at the same time is what we refer to as Ludwig's angina. Spread of the infection further on through the fascial spaces in between tissues is also referred to as cellulitis. Moving on to the next periapical pathology, which is chronic in nature, is referred to as the periapical granuloma. So periapical granuloma is a chronic inflammatory response to pulpal infection in the periapical area. Sometimes it is also known as chronic apical periodontitis or asymptomatic apical periodontitis. The associated tooth is always carious. There will be a deep, slow progressive carious lesion. The tooth will generally be asymptomatic. The patient may not always complain of tenderness on percussion for the tooth, so the pain may be only occasional. When percussion test is done, it gives a characteristic dull percussion note. Please keep in mind this point. In case of periapical granuloma, the percussion test will reveal a dull percussion note. A normal tooth will have a metallic sound. Infected periapical inflammation will generally result in pain, tenderness on percussion. So in periapical granuloma, there is a low grade inflammation, or not a low grade, a chronic inflammatory process is happening around the root apex such that it gives rise to a proliferating infected granulation tissue formation. If a IOPA is taken, we can see a well-defined radiolucency around the root apex. The size of the radiolucency is generally less than 1 centimeter. So a radiolucency, a well-defined radiolucency less than 1 centimeter around the root apex is indicative of a periapical granuloma. Treatment of periapical granuloma involves surgical curettage of the lesion. Surgically, a window is created on the alveolar bone and the soft tissue, granulation tissue, is removed surgically. This is called as curettage. If the tooth is saved, it has to be treated by root canal treatment. Following curettage, the root apex needs to be amputated so as to remove any infective material left behind. So this process is known as apicectomy. So apicectomy is also added onto the treatment. The pathogenesis of periapical granuloma is basically related to the presence of a chronic inflammation, a persistent irritation from bacteria and its byproducts, that is involving the pulp, moves into the periapical area. So a chronic case of pulpitis which has progressed into the periapical area and remains chronic in nature will result in bone resorption. So this bone resorption can be seen as radiolucent area. Since this is a chronic process, the process of healing is also taking place at the same time, such that the resorbed area is replaced by granulation tissue. However, since the irritation is persistent, the granulation tissue continues to stay chronically inflamed. So an inflammatory process is also active at the same time. So there is resorption of bone, there is formation of granulation tissue, and there is presence of chronic inflammation. This results in a lesional tissue which is referred to as periapical granuloma. So histological evaluation of a case of curettage tissue from the periapical area will show a chronically inflamed granulation tissue. If you can see the histopath picture here, the photomicrograph, you can see this is a decalcified section showing the root apex. This is the root apex. This is the dentin of the root. This and this is the dentin. You can see the cementum here lining the dentin. This is the cementum. The pulp tissue which is continuing into the periodontal ligament space, and there is numerous collagen fibers which is formed as a part of granulation tissue. You can see this dark inflammatory cells which are diffusely spread throughout the tissue. In addition, we can see something called the cell rests of Malassez, which are resting cells in the periodontal ligament space. As a part of inflammation, these will undergo proliferation. The increased inflammation will also result in increased vascularity, such that the RBCs are spread out into the tooth surface. These RBCs undergo disintegration, releasing hemosiderin pigments. These hemosiderin pigments will further break down into cholesterol, such that during tissue processing, these cholesterol are washed away from the tissue and results in what we call as cholesterol clefts. So in this photomicrograph, you can see there is a mass of epithelial cells. These are the proliferation of cell rests of Malassez, which is basically secondary to the inflammatory cells, stimulation from the inflammatory cells and its mediators. You can also see in certain areas empty space, needle-like areas which are present in a localized area, and this is what we call as cholesterol clefts. These cholesterol clefts are a result of the breakdown of red blood cells, which gives rise to hemosiderin pigments, which further gives rise to cholesterol in the tissue, which during tissue processing is lost, such that it results in empty needle-like spaces, which are referred to as cholesterol clefts. So all these features are seen in periapical granuloma and helps in the identification of its nature. In some cases, the periapical granuloma, if untreated, can undergo enlargement and result in cystification, or the presence of chronic inflammation in the periapical area can directly result to a formation of a cyst, which is referred to as the periapical cyst. Before we discuss further, we need to know that a cyst is a pathological cavity which may or may not be lined by epithelium, and the cavity contains fluid, semi-fluid or gaseous content and not pus. We will be discussing about the topic cyst later when we discuss odontogenic cysts. For the time being, we will discuss in brief the periapical cyst, which is also known as the radicular cyst. This cyst is formed as a result of inflammation in the periapical area of the tooth, and hence it is also considered an inflammatory cyst. Inflammatory odontogenic cyst because it is derived from cells of the odontogenic apparatus. In this case, the radicular cyst is derived from the cell rest of Malassez. An important point to remember here is clinically, if radicular cyst is present, it is always associated with a non-vital tooth. A non-vital tooth is when there is disintegration of the pulp such that the pulp degenerates and undergoes necrosis. The inflammation which is persisting following this is chronic in nature, which will result in stimulation of the epithelial cell rest of Malassez in the periapical area. This is seen in periapical granuloma as well. However, the process, when it continues, the proliferating mass of cells will become larger such that the central cells undergo necrosis, liquefactive necrosis, because they are devoid of blood supply from the surrounding tissue. Because the mass of cells is larger, there is a larger distance for the blood vessels to diffuse, so the central cells undergo liquefactive necrosis, resulting in formation of fluid. When this fluid forms, the hydrodynamic pressure increases. Also, there is a change in osmotic pressure, which results in expansion of this cavity, such that the surrounding connective tissue stroma is trying to consolidate as a fibrous capsule. The net result is the presence of a cyst. Remember that the cyst always has a central lumen. If it is a true cyst, it will have a epithelial lining on the around the lumen, and the epithelial lining will always be surrounded by a connective tissue capsule. Clinically, certain radicular cysts may also result in swelling of the cortical bone or the swelling of the jaw. This is a feature which is commonly seen in case of radicular cyst, that is cortical expansion. Histological evaluation of a radicular cyst will reveal a cystic lumen which is lined by non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. A characteristic feature of the lining epithelium is that the epithelial cells are arranged in a arcading pattern. The term arcading is synonymous with the arc-shaped bridges seen in the European countries. So the arcs are resembling this arrangement of cells, and hence we refer to this as the arcading pattern. The underlying connective tissue capsule will show a dense infiltration of chronic inflammatory cells, which will include lymphocytes, plasma cells, and so on. Periapical cyst on radiographic evaluation will show a well-defined radiolucency like that seen for periapical granuloma. However, the difference here is that the size of the radiolucency is larger than 1 centimeter. So whenever we see a well-defined periapical radiolucency, if it is less than 1 centimeter and if the tooth is showing a dull percussion note, mild tenderness, it should be considered as a periapical granuloma. If the radiolucency is larger than 1 centimeter, there is dull pain and similar chronic findings, and the tooth is non-vital, then we diagnose it as periapical cyst or radicular cyst. Treatment of this will definitely include surgical enucleation of the cyst. A window is created similar to what we do for periapical granuloma, following which the entire cyst is removed in toto, following which episectomy will be done, wherein the root apex is amputated so as to remove any residual infective material. This area is filled with the root end filling. Root canal treatment is continued in the normal way and the tooth restored. So the treatment of a tooth affected with radicular cyst will include surgical enucleation, episectomy, and root canal treatment, such that all inciting factors are removed. So that concludes the major common lesions affecting the periapical area. In addition, there are some other conditions which occur in the periapical area and are generally in response to low-grade chronic irritation. So the inflammation occurring in these pathologies is less than what you see in the pathologies what we have discussed so far. So if it's really low-grade inflammation, probably the pulpitis is really mild in nature and the inflammation is really chronic, and only few inflammatory mediators are progressing into the periapical area. So instead of causing resorption, the process of healing, that is bone apposition, is overtaking the process of resorption. When this happens, the periapical area will show a large area of radio opacity. A large area of radio opacity which is not attached directly to the root. The radio opacity is not separated by any radiolucency on the periphery. That means it is continuous with the surrounding normal bone. However, you can see the difference in the radio opacity of the normal bone as compared to that of the periapical area. This is what we refer to as condensing osteitis. Clinically, condensing osteitis, the tooth will be vital. It will respond to any pulp vitality test like cold test, hot test or electric pulp test. Also, the tooth will generally be painless, and this condition will be identified probably incidentally. So, the tooth should be basically treated for that caries and removed any infective active inflammation in that tooth, and result in what we call as hypercementosis. This is due to the excessive formation of cementum and results in hypercementosis. It results in a bulbous enlargement of the surface of the tooth. The periodontal ligament space is and lamina dura is intact, but will follow the enlarged curvature of the root surface. The most common case of hypercementosis is supra eruption or a traumatic occlusion. However, it can also result as a consequence of a low-grade inflammation appearing in the periapical area. The clinical significance of hypercementosis is that such tooth are difficult to be treated endodontically. Also, there will be complications arising during extraction, such that there may be a root fracture during that procedure. Finally, another lesion associated with the low-grade inflammation is the root resorption. Low-grade inflammation can result in resorption of the root in the periapical area, or resorption can occur within the pulp chamber such that it results in enlargement. These cases are difficult to handle and treat using root canal treatment as well, because of the alteration in the pulp chamber and inability to seal the cavity properly. Generally, root resorption occurs physiologically as a part of tooth exfoliation. Root resorption also occurs during the orthodontic treatment. Root resorption occurs in relation to any periapical tumors or neoplasm. However, at times the resorption can occur as a result of pulpal infection extending into the periapical area. This resorption is not sharp as seen in that of the neoplastic nature, but there will be a definite loss of the contours of the tooth. Depending on whether it is occurring outside or within the pulp cavity, we refer to it as internal or external resorption. So this sums up the lecture for today. I hope everyone is clear with the various periapical pathologies by now. Any further doubts we will be discussing in the practical discussion on Google Meet. Stay safe everyone, see you soon.